It's a fun little castle that you can garrison some troops there, and it's got a little courtyard with some walls and a sort of grate. So there's a lot of fun details on this one, and we're going to be learning how to put it together today. So the first thing you're going to need is printed out copies of the Charlie's Castle PDF, and that's going to be 5 pages front and back. If you're finding that you're having trouble getting them to line up, maybe try printing them out and manually flipping them instead of having your printer flip them for you. You're also going to need some pieces of backing material. I've got 2 pieces of mat board here that are 7 inches by 12 inches. So those will provide the stability we need there. Some scissors are nice. Not necessary if you have an X-Acto knife. A couple of extra blades in case you snap your blades, like I always do. A ruler is good, and some double-sided tape or glue. I'm using double-sided tape for this because it is going to make it go a little faster. You're also going to need a tool for scoring. My favorite tool for scoring is a dried out ballpoint pen. You just take the ink tube out of the inside and scribble until it runs out, and you'll have a great tool for making those lines where it's gonna fold. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we're gonna do is we got our 2 base pieces, and we're gonna cut them out and tape them to the boards. Because we're going to trim the boards after this is glued on, we don't need to cut we have to cut right to the lines right now, except in a few places where the pieces will overlap. So this line right here, I'm going to cut right to cut off the white stuff here, and then this piece right here is going to be right on maybe an overlapping part, so we're going to cut that too. Choice. All right, and then on this one, this needs to be a precise cut right here, or not precise, but it just needs to not have any white space on there. This part we can really just cut down the middle, and this one needs to not have white because it's going to be an overlapping spot. This one has no overlapping spots, so we just kind of need to make sure that it's sort of roughly cut out so we can tell where the edges are. Okay. Next, we attach all the pieces together, and they were labeled on the sides. You can see these spots. These show you like which part of the hex that part is. And the ground textures on these should match up pretty nicely, so we can tell exactly where they go. Match everything up. That corner, the Persian rug, this other corner. Make sure everything's aligned and create the full base. I recommend printing these on it's actually on a cardstock, heavier, you know. You want it to be 60 or 80 pound cover stock. If you're going to use tape, I would say use gloss because it's looks fantastic. If you're not going to use tape to put them together, then I would say don't go with a glossy paper because the glue is going to have a harder time adhering to a glossy paper, depending on the glue you use. I mean, a white glue is gonna have trouble with gloss. Obviously, a like a super glue or something, probably fine, whatever. All right. And when we attach this piece, it's gonna finish the base. So basically, the base, putting the base together is probably gonna use more tape than anything on this project, because you're basically using a foot here, like another foot here, and then you're using another like 5 feet to attach the base, attach this piece to the rest of the base. So let's see, I have trouble aligning here. Let's get it just right on this part at least. I want this part to look good. And then, okay, there we go. All right, so the base, and then we've got our center line. That's hard to miss. It's a big line right through the middle. What we're gonna do is make sure that that is scored, so that that's where it bends. We don't want it to bend in another spot. Could cause some trouble. So bend it right down that middle line. Now, some of them are going to bend in the middle of a flat side, and some of these sets are going to bend from corner to corner. So watch that and bend it in the right place. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is get some tape all the way around the edge of each half, including down the middle. That's important because it's what's going to make this whole thing work. Because I'm using a thick paper, I'm not going to worry about taping through the middle of this, just on the middle of this half, just around all the edges. If I was using a thinner paper, then I would use a spray adhesive to attach the whole thing to the backing material, but that's really only if you're using like I mean, you could print the base. You don't have to print the base on cardstock, but it does make things easier if you do. If you print it on you could print on regular, printer thickness paper, and then the base would still be doing a lot of work. You'd probably want to reinforce the middle edge. So, like, for the sake of simplicity, it might be easier to just print it on cardstock if you've got cardstock there already. Just print it off cardstock. You'll be fine. Okie doke. So we got our tape all the way around the edges of each half, and we're going to then attach each half to the backing material. And what I like to do is set one piece of backing material down, put the base next to it, put the other piece on top of it, and then attach, because I need to make sure that there's a little bit of space in between the pieces of backing material. If not, it's harder for the pop-up to lay flat, because those pieces kind of push against each other if they're really close to each other in the middle. And it's not a huge problem. I've assembled a lot of pieces like that, and they just kind of they settle after a few minutes. But I mean, if you're if you want to keep your pop-ups as a surprise for like, oh, your players don't know what the building is that they're about to be assaulting, then it's kind of nice to be able to just pop it up right then. Alright, and this one, just make sure you give it a little bit of space, just not a lot, you know, like but you want that little bit of space in between here, like about like a 1/16 of an inch or something, you know, an 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, somewhere in there is just right. And then once you've got that on, you cut off your excess material. And you can do that with an X-Acto knife. You can do that with scissors, but I like to do mine with this heavy-duty paper cutter because it's fun. So you want to cut off your edges and make it a nice hexagon. We're learning shapes. Yeah, get a nice hexagon out of there. And you'll be ready to move on to the next part of the project. So you've got your hexagon base. Let's clear up some of this extra material and we'll be ready to start working on attaching the parts to the base. So the first thing we're going to want to do is score all the parts. Score, score, score. And what that means is we're going to draw a line from each blue arrow to the corresponding blue arrow across from it. And for this setting, it looks like each of those are clearly marked with a thick black line so that we know exactly what we're scoring along. And that's one piece. If you're not sure if you scored, you can usually feel it. You're using your ballpoint pen, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that the pop-up is going to fold here where we're scoring before it folds anywhere else. So if you score extra spots, it's usually not a huge deal. The main thing is this is where the force is going to be being applied for it to fold, and we want it to fold there in a nice neat line, and so we're compressing the paper at that point so that that line folds there. And you know, if we missed a spot, we can always go back and score it at a later point, or there's a good chance that the pop-up itself will just make it fold there when it needs to. But let's score it for now, and then we find part number one, which is right here. Okay. So when you're cutting with an X-Acto knife, you want to pull towards you, generally speaking. There might be some situations where you find that that is not possible, but by pulling towards you, you're letting the knife's blade do its work properly. Cut out interior spaces, and there goes the end of my blade. Cut out interior parts first. Just going to be easier, and there's more support for the force of the X-Acto knife going through the paper. It's not going to bend anything if you cut out these interior spots before you cut out the rest. So that is what we are doing now. Cut out all the white space. Now if you want, you can see these guys have a little bit of angle on the sides. the blocks. See that little angle? I'm just gonna cut that off on mine because I think it'll look fancier. But I mean, it's really up to you. If you want to put that extra effort in for the tiny cut on every single one of them, then you can do that too. I think it'll look a little bit cooler because the texture's there to kind of make it look a little bit 3D, and that little angle just adds to that, the illusion that this wall is not just a piece of paper. It has a little bit of depth visually. Not really though, it is just paper. Okay. Alright, so that's the crenulations. We got those all cut out. And that's part number one. Okay, part number one. I got a little extra material there. Let's slice that. Okay, part number one is good to go. And for now, part number one, I think just attaches to the base, so we just need some tape on these parts. And that will allow us to get this right into place. We've got the markings on the base, one to be 1 and one to be 2. Okay? So we make sure that we're attaching the right one to the right one. The shapes kind of match up, the textures on the ground will match up, and we can attach those onto the base. And again, match up those textures. They will match up nicely and allow you to know exactly where you're putting that. So that piece is down. We move on to part number 2. Part number 2. Oh, part number 2 right here. You might have trouble finding the parts. It's like a little Where's Waldo. I made this, and I still had trouble finding part number 2. It's over here. So happens to all of us, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it just happens to me. Okay, so part number 2 is going to be this little ladder that goes inside, and we gonna want the pieces to look something like this, I believe. 2 to be 2, 2 to be 1. Okay, yep. So we're gonna glue down, attach, tape or glue. We tape or glue here, and that part is gonna go down onto here. The base textures on this one are a little tricky to match up, to be honest. Wait, yeah. So just do your best to get it right. Okay. And now we have part number 3. Part number 3 is gonna be the little upper balcony area of this little fort, and it's gonna need to fold like this, and it's gonna need to be glued right there. Okay, so that's why we did part number 2 first, so that we would be sure to have these interior parts glued in, because it's kind of hard to get them in after you glued in part number 4. Possible, but hard. All right. So then we just want that to be a right angle in the corner and attached right there so that it fits on. And you'll see the bottom is going to look like it should fit there. Okay. Next, part number 4. So what we're making here is a doorway. It's a nice big doorway. You could ride a horse through there if you had a horse. I find, I don't know how much good it does, like unless you're, maybe you guys know better, but it seems to me that when I'm playing a game of D&D, you got horses and they almost seem like an afterthought, like you have to always forget about them. At least I always forget that I have a horse. I'm like, oh yeah, back when we were gonna like worry about encumbrance, I bought a horse. Personally, I feel like encumbrance is sort of a weird thing. Like on the one hand, I'm like, oh yeah, I want a really gritty, real game, and then I start playing and I'm like, I don't want a gritty, real game. That's too much crap to think about. Just want to have a fun story. I mean, think about like what would people actually have done if they had a bunch of stuff to carry and they were looting some ruins? I mean, in my mind, you'd be looting the ruins, and then you would start to think, oh hey, this is too much stuff for us to carry in one trip. That's great. We're gonna hide these in the bushes, or like somewhere where we know where they are, where someone else is unlikely to look. Dig them, dig a hole, put them in there or something. And then after that, you might think, we'll go back and get them. There we go. Just match up those textures on the ground as best we can. Tight fit against that part. Then we match up these ground textures as well. Cinch it in. Okay. And now we're going to want to attach this part 3 to part 4 along the top there. Make sure this balcony is looking good. So I don't know about you guys, you probably loved pop-ups as a kid too. What kid doesn't love pop-ups? But you know, I try to make my own pop-ups and stuff. And maybe that's what led me here today, I don't know. But, alright. Let's get that on there, that on there. Try to get as close into the corner as you can. Okay, and that part, I mean, now's a good time to fold it, make sure everything folds and stays together. And it does, and it looks great. So now we're going to add some outer structures, a little walkway over here, and that is going to come in the personage of part 5, which will cut out. Part 5 doesn't have any crenulations, so it should cut out pretty quickly. Alright, part 5. Now part 5, the folding is a little bit complicated. Fold the middle that way. These bottom flaps are going to come out towards us. Then these upper parts are going to fold right along where the stone meets the wood there. And then they're going to fold again where the stone meets the wood there. Okay? So the part's going to look like that. And we're going to attach it to the outside like that. Okay? So let's do one side first here. Get that in place. Now we're going to do the upper part of this side. Put some tape on there. Tape it on. Match up the textures. Best you can. Then we're gonna tape this bottom section. Shouldn't be too difficult to line up since you're just kind of swiveling it into place. And maybe you forgot to tuck that part underneath. That's fine. It's paper, it'll bend. This part, I mean, you can glue it. If you forget to glue that part, it's not going to make a huge difference one way or the other, but there's a spot there that says it should be attached, so adds a little more stability, maybe. Let's put something under there to make sure it sticks. And then 5 to 1, 2 here. We're gonna tape that on. After that's attached, it's another great time to fold flat, make sure everything's working as intended, and it seems like this part's not taped on as well as I would like in there. Just kind of get something in there. Make sure it's on, make sure that folds properly. And there you go. We're looking good there. Next we have part 7 and part 8. Those parts are these little parapet parts that attach to the wall there to part 5. Wait, we skipped part 6? Yeah, we did. Okay, we'll go back for part 6. Part 6 is a surprisingly essential part of this pop-up. Basically, without part 6, this thing's not going to work. Well, part of it's not going to work. I mean, most of it will work, but there's a part that won't work. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm pretty proud of part 6, okay? So that is part 7. And you line that up with the textures. Goes right there. And now let's go back for part 6, because part 6 is very important and you don't want to forget about it. It's a small part, but it is something that makes what I consider one of the holy grails of pop-ups possible. And that holy grail is getting a wall to pop up that goes all the way out to the edge of the page. And it's just by itself. It's just a wall. And it still pops up. Okay? So, with part 6, working with part 13, it does that. Okay? And I think I almost discovered it by accident. I'm sure there are people out there who like know more about pop-ups than I do that are like, duh. Like, everyone knows how to do that. But I have a somewhat narrow focus on pop-ups that is like trying to make buildings that feel like they have some interior spaces and exterior spaces and like will be fun to play with. I feel like most pop-up people are focused on like that cool like opening part. But for me, the real thing is like isn't that it opens; it's that it like does like it has this cool function where you can put it in a game and every time I cut off those corners first, I forget to cut out the rest. Alright, so this is part 8. And we're going to put our tape on there. Attach part 8 to part 5. Match up the lines. And we've got sort of the bulk of the castle here. You know, it's working. So now we're going to add some other scenery that's going to make this feel a little bit less of an isolated block. And part of that is this rock that's nearby. And that is part 9. Part 9 gets attached directly to the base. Part 9 isn't going to stand up by itself. Right? Part 9 needs some help. It'll lay flat by itself, but it's not going to stand up by itself. So we need to attach part 10. And part 10's job is to go in between part 9 and the rest of the castle make sure part 9 stands up. So we're going to attach the spots 10 to 9 and 10 to 5, which doesn't seem like a bad work day. Either one. 10 to 9, obviously. That's a pretty cush work day. Unless it's, 9 at night. Anyway, 10 to 5 and 10 to 9. And this piece is going to be folded like a little table. And it's just going to go right in there in between. And it's just going to stick in between those two. And the textures, if you've gotten your printer to line up the textures will line up nicely. If you haven't gotten your printer to line up the textures, it might not, Okay, so that was part 10. Now we're on to part 11, which is the blue banner. So it's sort of like blue team fort. I'm not gonna lie, I played a lot of Halo 1. We'd all get our Xboxes and our TVs. We'd like carry our TVs over to our friend's house and we'd set them up. All the TVs would be in the middle, ideally, so that nobody could screen watch, and they'd be facing out, and we'd all have our Xboxes in there plugged into like somebody's router or like specifically designed hub for the those Ethernet cables. Plug them all in, and that was our Xbox Live back in the day. And there'd always be one guy that was like way better than the rest of us, like he knew all the spots, and he had all the spawn points like timed, so he knew exactly when you were gonna pop up, and there would be a sniper bullet there to meet you. But obviously one of the best maps was oh dang, now I can't think of the name of it. The Gulch. Is it the Gulch? No, I can't remember. Anyway, the point of this story is there was the red side and there was the blue side. Okay? And this is the blue side. So there you go. And somehow I managed to get distracted from cutting out part 12. I cut out part 13. Just watch, okay? This is the miracle part. This piece just goes right here. Just a wall standing by itself by this other wall. And because of this little tab and this door that it can go through, the tab has to go through the door. You seeing that? The tab goes through the door and comes out the other side, and because of that, when it pops back up, the wall pops up. Okay? Anyway, that tab needs to be there, but it has to be able to go through the part for now. There might be another way to do it, but it makes this wall pop up all on its own and create this cool little courtyard. And now we're going to do the other side of that wall, which is part 12. And part 12 is a lot less mysterious in how it works, but still cool. So anyway, dang it, now it's bugging me. What was the name of that map in Halo 1? Was it like Warthog Canyon or something? I'm gonna have to go look it up after this. Anyway, let's attach part number 12. That goes right there. The textures match up, and it makes a corresponding wall that kind of makes this little courtyard happen. It's kind of fun, a little place where you can park your horses if you don't want to ride them in through this horse door. That's big. It's a big horse door. Okay, so that's all the regular parts. Now we're moving on to the tabs. What the tabs are going to do is close off these ends, make it look like the walls are a little more solid, which is good for me. So you got tab 1, tab 2. We're going to cut out these interior tab slots first because that's what we do. And we're going to make sure that this slanted edge, a little upper cutoff corner, is snug against the larger building, so it's going to go right there. And I mean, this will really only kind of fit on one way, so if you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. This is actually the wrong side, so I am doing it wrong. So we're attaching T1 to 5, and we're going to slot T1 onto part 5 before we attach tab 1. Tab 1 onto part 5 before we attach T1, sorry. Reverse that, as it were. I'm seeing a little bit of adhesive on there. This part's only job is to make sure that the tab doesn't fall off. So it doesn't need like a ton of heavy support. It just needs to be there so that can happen. So there we go. And that flaps down and makes the wall look flat. And then I really love these. I really love to use these gravity flaps in pop-ups, where you have this flap that just gravity pulls it down, and part of that is because I like to be able to open things up, you know. So it's still accessible. Your soldiers could hide in there, pop out, you know. Goblins in the walls. So T2 gets slotted onto tab 2 gets slotted onto 5, and then T2 is attached. So that is your pop-up Charlie's Castle. It's all put together, and it closes, which is a big deal, and then it pops back up, which is a bigger one. Okay, so Charlie's Castle, the pop-up, ready to be inhabited by your team or a band of goblins, or if your team is a band of goblins, even better. Thanks for watching. You should be able to find these on stonehavenmini.com.